Take the dress off slowly, sweetheart. Stolen property goes back to the store. Officer, this is my wedding. Sit down, sir, or you can spend the beginning of your marriage in a cell. That veil belonged to her grandmother. You just tore it off her head. Evidence. The little crown comes off too. There. Now you look more like the booking photo. She paid for that dress. I have the receipt right here. A phone screen is not evidence. Hands behind your back. Now. I'll go quietly. One thing first. You don't get requests, sweetheart. Run my name. Spell it correctly. The officer laughed. I had no idea that the next words coming from dispatch would silence every police radio listening across the county. But to understand how a bride ended up handcuffed beneath a rose-covered wedding arch, you have to go back to the quiet morning before everything changed. Have you ever been accused of stealing the life you built for yourself? Soft light settled over Bellamy Ridge Vineyard, west of Richmond, Virginia. Mist rested between the rows of vines. The hills looked brushed in copper, and the air carried the sweet, sharp smell of crushed grapes and cut grass. White chairs waited in careful lines across the lawn. A string quartet tuned beneath an arch covered in cream-colored roses. Somewhere behind the farmhouse, a caterer called for more ice. Inside the bridal suite, Simone Barrett stood perfectly still while her sister, Mariah, pinned the veil into place. Simone was 38 years old. She had calm eyes, controlled hands, and a habit of noticing more than she ever said. The veil was old lace, delicate and soft, passed down from a grandmother who had spent decades cleaning hotel rooms, so her children and grandchildren could climb into lives she had never been offered. Simone touched the edge of the lace once, then let her hand fall. If the guests had been asked what she did for a living, most of them would have given the same vague answer. Something with the city. Government work, maybe. Simone rarely corrected anyone. She had spent 15 years learning that silence often reveals more than questions do. Even the mother of her fiancé, who had tried every polite way to learn more, had received only a warm smile and a change of subject. Gavin Mercer was an architect, patient and exact, the kind of man who measured twice before cutting anything except when it came to falling in love. He liked to say that part had taken him one look. Simone always answered that she had needed 3. She never mentioned that she had also checked the exits before deciding where to sit. Gavin knew what she did, of course. You do not marry someone without knowing the truth of her life. But they had agreed that their wedding would belong to the cake, the vows, the music, their families, and one ordinary day when Simone could simply be Simone. Old habits still lived inside her like a second skeleton. At restaurants, she preferred the chair facing the door. In crowded rooms, she noticed who watched too closely, who avoided eye contact, who stood near exits, who kept one hand hidden. Maria lifted a folded napkin from the head table and laughed. Who folds napkins like they're standing for inspection? Simone smiled and said nothing. Maria adjusted the final pin in the veil and stepped back. Grandma would lose her mind if she could see you. For one brief moment, Simone's calm cracked. Her eyes brightened with tears. Then she breathed in slowly and let the stillness return. Their grandmother's photograph waited on the gift table in a silver frame. Outside, the quartet found its melody. Not far away, a bridal boutique had an open theft report. A designer, sample gown, covered in beadwork, had disappeared from a fitting room. It was valuable enough to cost more than many used cars. The shop owner reported the theft and kept a grainy security photograph near the register. There was no identified suspect and no solid lead. Only a missing gown, a report in the county system, and a photograph that would have answered the most important question if anyone had bothered to look at it. Inside the Cairo County Police Department, Sergeant Bryce Halbrook had been reading another document with much greater concern. The department was about to receive new leadership in its Internal Affairs Bureau. Old complaints would be reviewed again. Previous investigations could be reopened. A new commander had been brought in from outside the department with explicit authority to examine patterns that had been ignored for years. A patrol officer later remembered seeing Bryce standing beside the coffee machine with the memo in his hand. His face had gone pale. At Bellamy Ridge, the lawn filled with guests. There were around 150 people in linen suits, dresses, hats, perfume, and nervous laughter. Children chased one another near the vines. Someone's uncle had already started crying before the ceremony began. Gavin waited beneath the rose arch, shifting from one foot to the other and grinning at everyone and no one. Reverend Elias Carter opened his worn Bible to the page he had marked. Then the music changed. Simone walked down the aisle on her own. No one gave her away. She had explained the decision to Mariah in simple terms. She had built her life one careful choice at a time. She would walk into this one the same way. Guests stood. Phones lifted. Gavin's chin trembled. The morning seemed to hold its breath. And several miles away, County Dispatch received an anonymous call. The voice was male, muffled, strangely flat, and too rehearsed for someone reporting an emergency. The caller claimed there was a disturbance at Bellamy Ridge Vineyard involving a black woman wearing a stolen designer gown. Used police language most civilians would never use naturally. Then the call ended before the dispatcher could ask questions. Renee Parker handled the call. She had worked dispatch long enough to hear things other people missed. She listened to voices, the way teachers listen to students reading essays. This one bothered her. The caller did not sound frightened. He did not sound angry. He sounded prepared. Renee logged the call and broadcast it because procedure required her to do so. But she also entered a note into the record. Caller refused to identify himself. That small line would matter later. Officer Travis Maddox heard the broadcast and turned his cruiser toward the vineyard before dispatch had finished describing the location. His partner, Colin Hayes, looked over from the passenger seat. Colin was young, still early in his career, and still polished his boots as though someone from the academy might inspect them at any moment. "That's not our zone," he said. "Another unit is closer." Travis accelerated. "Stolen designer gown at a vineyard full of witnesses. That's a felony, with an audience. Clean arrest." Colin looked at the computer screen. "Shouldn't we call the boutique first? At least confirm the stolen dress matches." Travis repeated the word as if it offended him. "Confirm." Then he gave the younger officer a knowing smile. "I've been doing this for 12 years. After a while you develop instincts. Some people belong at a place like Bellamy Ridge." He checked the mirror. "And some people are shopping for a story." Colin said nothing. I had been riding with Travis long enough to learn that silence was often the cheapest seat in the cruiser. But the uneasy feeling in his stomach had started again. There were stories about Travis throughout the department. 9 formal complaints across 12 years. Words like discourteous conduct, improper detention, and unnecessary escalation appeared in files that rarely stayed open for long. Each complaint had been reviewed and closed by the same supervising sergeant, Bryce Halbrook. Travis called the complaints love letters from people who hated losing. I had never received meaningful discipline. He carried himself like a man who believed he never would. The cruiser approached Bellamy Ridge without emergency lights. Travis liked arriving quietly. He claimed loud arrivals gave people time to perform. The simpler truth was that he enjoyed the moment a scene noticed him. He liked the ripple, conversation stopping, people turning. At the vineyard gate, an event coordinator, carrying a clipboard, tried to direct the cruiser toward guest parking. Travis drove past her. She called after him that it was a private wedding. He answered through the window. "I know exactly what it is." Under the rose arch, Reverend Carter had reached the vows. Gavin spoke first. His voice cracked partway through, and the guests laughed and cried in the gentle way people do at weddings that feel real. Simone took his hands. Light passed through the antique lace and formed a pale halo around her shoulders. She opened her mouth to speak, then boots sounded on the grass. A duty belt creaked. A police radio murmured. The quartet faltered and stopped. Travis Maddox walked up the center aisle, like a man entering a room he already owned. Colin followed several steps behind him, uneasy and quiet. "Sorry, everyone, this is not part of the ceremony." Travis stopped in front of Simone. "Ma'am, step away from the gentleman. We have a report involving a stolen designer gown that matches what you're wearing." He looked at the beadwork as though appraising merchandise. "Look at that. Tag still attached." His eyes moved over Simone, then back to the gown. People like you don't usually walk through the front door of a store that sells something like this. A sound moved through the guests. Part gasp, part anger. Gavin stepped forward. Officer, this is our wedding. Sit down, sir, or you can start your honeymoon in a holding cell. Simone did not move. Later, dozens of people would describe the same detail. The bride became perfectly still. Chin level, breathing controlled. Officer, she said, what is your name and badge number? Travis stared at her. I asked the questions. Identification. Now. My wallet is in the bridal suite behind you. I'll walk there with you and hand it to you myself. So you're refusing to identify yourself? No. I'm offering to retrieve my identification while you watch me do it. Travis pulled out his citation pad. Refusing lawful commands. We're getting close to resisting territory now, sweetheart. No one is resisting anything, Simone said. You're escalating a wedding. Gavin had his phone out. His hands shook as he searched through photographs and receipts. Here, I have the purchase receipt. Hargrove Bridal. Paid in full. The gown is right here. The order number is right there. Travis never lowered his eyes to the screen. Phone evidence isn't evidence. Anybody can make a receipt on a phone. Then call the boutique, Mariah shouted. She came down the aisle, gripping her bouquet. They're open. Call them and ask. Ma'am, back up. That's my sister. Back up. Colin shifted beside the officer. Travis, maybe we should check the receipt and call the store. Travis did not turn around. Phone evidence isn't evidence, rookie. Watch the crowd. Phones were raised everywhere now. Reverend Carter closed his Bible and stepped down from the arch. He placed himself gently but deliberately between Travis and the bride. Son, I've baptized half this county. I know this woman. Whatever you believe is happening here, it isn't. Reverend, move or you're next. I've been arrested before, Reverend Carter said quietly. I was a child marching for civil rights when it happened. Then you know how this works. Move. Someone in the crowd shouted that they were calling an attorney. Someone else was crying. A child asked why the police officer was being mean to the princess. Travis reached around the reverend and grabbed Simone's veil. What happened next was captured from dozens of angles. He pulled it from her head. Pins tore loose. The antique lace, sewn by a hotel worker and worn by generations of women in Simone's family, fluttered down toward the grass. The guests shouted. Maria lunged forward and two relatives caught her by the arms. That was Grandma's veil. You ripped it off her head. Evidence, Travis said. I handed the lace to Colin. The younger officer held it carefully, as though it might still be alive. The little crown comes off too, Travis said. There, now you match the booking photo. Then he turned Simone by one arm. A seam at the shoulder of the gown tore open. The sound was small, but Gavin heard it clearly. Travis pulled Simone's hands behind her back. The cuffs closed tightly around her wrists. Too tightly. The cellist from the quartet stood up, turned his chair away from the ceremony, and faced the other direction. Later he would say it was the only protest he could think of without making the situation more dangerous. The vineyard no longer looked like a wedding. Programs lay scattered in the grass. A flower girl hid her face against her mother's lap. The untouched cake sat beneath glass as though it belonged to another version of the day. Gavin's friends held him back. Everyone understood the same terrible calculation. One impulsive move could turn one arrest into two. Gavin stared at the woman he was supposed to marry, handcuffed beneath the arch, her shoulder exposed where the gown had torn, her grandmother's veil gone. And Simone remained calm. No screaming, no struggling, no tears. She stood in the ruin of her own wedding, like a woman reading a report she had already finished writing. I'll go quietly, she said. One thing first. You don't get requests, sweetheart. Simone turned her head just enough to meet Travis's eyes. Her voice dropped into a tone none of the guests had ever heard from her. Quiet. Procedural. Almost gentle. Run my name. Travis smiled. Simone continued. Spell it correctly. Colin would remember the sentence for the rest of his career. Not because of the words, because of the tone. People asking favors do not sound like that. People offering one final chance do. Travis laughed. It was the last carefree laugh he would make for a very long time. The back seat of a patrol car is designed to make a person feel smaller. Hard plastic, no interior door handles, steel mesh between the passenger and the world outside. Simone sat with her hands cuffed behind her. Torn satin gathered around her like spilled milk. Through the window, she watched her wedding collapse. Caterers stood frozen with trays in their hands. The rose arch leaned slightly after someone had bumped it. Guests clustered together, replaying what they had just recorded. Her grandmother's veil now rested in an evidence bag on the passenger seat. Simone catalogued everything. Witnesses, around 150. Recordings, dozens, from multiple angles. No clear charge stated before detention. Receipt offered and ignored. Identification offered and refused. Handcuffs too tight. Body camera status unknown. She filed each detail away in silence. Colin came to the rear window. "Ma'am, if those cuffs are too tight, I can loosen them." "Leave them," Travis called from the hood of the cruiser. I had paperwork spread across the metal like someone preparing lunch outdoors. Tight cuffs improve memory. Maybe she'll remember where she got the dress. Simone looked through the glass. "I remember everything." No one fully understood that sentence yet. Travis kept writing. He chose language slowly. Subject became agitated. Subject refused lawful commands. Subject physically resisted detention. Colin could read the lines upside down from where he stood. His stomach tightened. I had watched Simone remain still beneath the rose arch. "She didn't resist," he said. Travis continued writing. "Careful, rookie. I'm telling you what I saw." "The report isn't about what happened," Travis said. "It's about what holds up later." Then he glanced at the body camera mounted on his chest. "Battery's been acting up." He pressed the power control until the recording indicator went dark. Colin noticed. So did Colin's own camera, which remained on. No one had called Hargrove Bridal. The store was open, near the register. The owner was steaming a sample gown beneath the grainy photograph connected to the theft report. The real suspect shown in that image was a white woman in her 20s. One telephone call would have established that Simone did not match the suspect. The gown's information could have been compared with the purchase receipt in minutes. The call was never made. At the vineyard, the wedding had turned into something closer to an evidence scene. Guests grouped together, replaying recordings with trembling hands. The footage began moving through family chats and private messages before anyone posted it publicly. An aunt watched it and called a relative who worked in the federal courts. A former college roommate watched once and began looking up news contacts. The video traveled with the simplest possible explanation. "This is Simone. This is her wedding." Gavin stood near the fence with his collar open and boutonniere crushed in one hand. I was speaking to a law school friend. No charge was clearly stated before the cuffs. "Yes, there are dozens of videos." No, she wasn't resisting. He looked toward the cruiser. His voice broke. "She's sitting in there in her wedding dress." Maria was no longer crying. She stood near the gift table with their grandmother's photograph beside her and dialed a number Simone had once made her memorize. The number was saved without a person's name. Simone had given her only one instruction. "If something ever happens to me and a badge is involved, call this number. Say my full name and follow whatever instructions you receive." Maria pressed call. Somewhere in Richmond, a secure phone lit up on a desk few people in the state had permission to approach. A voice answered. "Maria Barrett, speaking. My sister is Simone Barrett." She spelled the name carefully. Then she said 2 words. "It's happening." Back at the cruiser, Travis finished his report and stretched his shoulders. In his mind, the call had gone well. A clean arrest at a wealthy venue. A story for the locker room. He lifted the radio. "Dispatch, run a name for me." "Female, black, late 30s. Simone Barrett." He spelled the surname. Inside the dispatch center, Renee Parker entered the name. The return appeared. She read it. Then she read it again. Her coffee stopped halfway toward her mouth. A dispatcher nearby heard her whisper, "Oh no." Renee reached for the radio carefully. "Unit, stand by." The channel went quiet. Police officers understand certain kinds of silence immediately. Dispatchers do not usually hesitate when a routine name check returns. When they do, Everyone listening becomes more alert. Renee stared at the information on her screen. There was a protocol for a return like this. There was also a bride sitting in a patrol car several miles away. Renee keyed the microphone again. Be advised, the name returns clear. No warrants. No criminal record. She paused. Then she chose the next words one at a time. The name returns to Deputy Chief Simone Barrett, newly appointed commander of the Internal Affairs Bureau. Another pause. She is within your chain of command. Confirm copy. Silence fell across the inner radio frequency. Patrol officers listening from parked cars stopped what they were doing. A sergeant set down his lunch. Units on roads and in parking lots waited. At Bellamy Ridge, Travis held the radio halfway to his mouth. The color left his face slowly. He looked at the device as though it had produced words that could not possibly belong to the language he knew. Colin took one small step backward. It was almost instinctive, the desire to be outside whatever blast radius had just formed around his partner. Wind moved through the vineyard. A guest's recording captured the only sound on the lawn. People breathing. Renee repeated the request. Confirm copy. Travis pressed the radio control. His first attempt produced no words. Then he tried again. Copy. The channel remained unusually quiet afterward. No routine traffic interrupted. No one asked for a license plate check. No officer requested a status update. Across the county, police were running the same facts through their minds. Wedding. Anonymous gown call. No verification. Bride in handcuffs. New commander of Internal Affairs. The calculation ended the same way everywhere. Travis Maddox had just detained the person appointed to review officers like him. Simone Barrett had served in law enforcement for 15 years. She began on patrol in Baltimore, working nights and foot posts in areas most officers did not request. She became a detective after proving herself through difficult investigations. Then she moved into internal investigations. For years, she examined misconduct cases other officers preferred not to discuss. She had worked hundreds of complaints. Her cases included senior supervisors and employees inside evidence operations. A commendation from a governor remained boxed because Simone found framed praise embarrassing. Caro County had recruited her for a specific reason. Complaints inside the department kept disappearing. Patterns were visible from outside but impossible to examine honestly from within. City leadership wanted someone independent, someone with enough experience to reopen old files and enough credibility to survive the backlash. The description used privately was simple. They wanted the cleanest pair of hands they could find. Simone had been sworn in quietly. There had been no press conference and no public celebration. Her first full day inside headquarters had not even arrived yet. That was why so few officers knew her face. The little habits her family joked about suddenly made sense. The chair facing the door, the inspection-perfect napkins, the way she read a room before relaxing inside it. The calm beneath the rose arch was not passivity. It was training. Travis opened the rear door of the cruiser. His hands had suddenly learned gentleness. "Ma'am, Chief, we're going to get those cuffs off you right now." "Don't." The single word stopped him. Simone turned toward him from the back seat. Her hands were still cuffed. One shoulder of the wedding dress was torn open. Her expression remained calm. "I remember everything," she said. Colin heard the sentence again and finally understood it. Simone looked directly at Travis. "Officer Maddox, as of this moment, you are the subject of an active pattern of conduct review. Everything here is potential evidence. You will not alter it." Travis swallowed. "Chief, I didn't know. Don't remove the cuffs yet. But they're hurting you. Then the marks need to be documented before the cuffs come off." Simone nodded toward the body camera on his chest. "Your camera is off." Travis looked down. "My battery. We'll document that too." Simone turned toward Colin. "Officer Hayes, is your body camera recording?" Colin looked at the indicator. "Yes, Chief. Keep it that way." She looked back at Travis. "Documentation is the job. Today you'll learn how it's done." Chief Nolan Reeves arrived soon afterward in his personal vehicle. He crossed the lawn quickly, still dressed for a day away from the office. High took in the leaning rose arch, the crying guests, the bride sitting in the patrol car, and the officers, standing beside her. His face seemed to age with every step. "Get those cuffs off her," he ordered. "Now." "No," Simone said. Nolan stopped. "Deputy Chief." "Not yet." Simone nodded toward the wedding photographer, who stood nearby gripping his camera. "That gentleman is going to photograph the cuffs, my wrists, this dress, and Officer Maddox's citation pad, exactly as they are right now." She looked toward Nolan. "Then your department can have its handcuffs back." And so one of the strangest evidence documentation scenes in county history unfolded beneath a wedding arch. The photographer captured close images of the cuffs around Simone's wrists. He photographed the redness beneath the metal, the torn seam in the gown, the citation pad on the hood, the position of the patrol vehicles, the veil in the evidence bag. Guests watched in silence, while the new head of internal affairs managed the aftermath of her own arrest like an investigator building a case file. Only after the documentation was complete did the cuffs come off. Simone rubbed her wrists once. Then she straightened what remained of the dress. Travis stood several feet away in the remains of the confident morning he had expected to enjoy. His written report lay on the hood of the cruiser. Subject physically resisted detention. The page moved slightly in the breeze. Simone looked past him. "One question," she said. Her eyes had changed focus. She was moving backward through the event the way investigators travel through a timeline. "Who called it in?" Everyone went quiet again, because that was the question no one at the vineyard had asked yet. The boutique had never reported a black woman as the thief. The photograph in the store showed a white woman. Someone had directed an anonymous call at this wedding, and the caller had used police language. That meant the problem might be larger than one officer making terrible assumptions. The story moved beyond the vineyard quickly. Video of a bride being handcuffed beneath a rose arch reached millions of people. News vans gathered outside Carroll County Police Headquarters. Telephones rang faster than employees could answer them. Inside the building, conversations dropped into whispers. Doors closed more softly than usual. Coffee burned in pots nobody remembered filling. When Simone finally entered Chief Nolan Reeves's office as Deputy Chief Barrett, rather than as a bride, she placed a one-page memorandum on his desk. "I am removing myself from the investigation." Nolan looked up. "You're the victim." "Exactly." Simone folded her hands. "Victims do not investigate their own cases. Call the Virginia State Police. Bring in people who have no friendships inside this building. Give them everything they request before they have to ask twice." Nolan read the memo again. "You would be within your authority to supervise the administrative side. The second I touch the evidence, Travis's attorney calls the case retaliation." Simone stood. "I didn't come here to win an argument, Chief. I came here to fix a department." She reached the door. "Let them see what it looks like when an investigation is done correctly." Captain Mara Sterling of the Virginia State Police arrived with 2 investigators and a forensic audio specialist. Mara had more than 2 decades in law enforcement and a reputation for being impressed by almost nothing except complete documentation. She took over a conference room and covered the interior windows so people in the hallway could not watch the investigation develop. Her team built the case the way masons build a wall, one verified stone at a time. The first stone was Colin Hayes's body camera. It contained an uninterrupted recording of the entire encounter. The walk up the aisle, Travis telling Simone that people like her did not come through the front door of the bridal shop. Gavin offering the receipt, Travis refusing to look at it. Maria demanding that the boutique be called. Colin suggesting the same thing. The veil being pulled away, the handcuffs tightening. Then the conversation beside the cruiser. The report isn't about what happened, it's about what holds up later. One investigator stopped the recording and looked across the table. Mara said nothing. The recording continued. Travis announced that his body camera battery had been acting up. The video showed his hand deliberately shutting the unit off. Department policy. Classified intentionally disabling the recording equipment during an enforcement action as a serious violation. Investigators understood that it could also become evidence of intent. The second stone came from the guests. State police created a secure address for recordings. More than 80 videos arrived. A technician synchronized them into a master timeline. Different angles captured the same moments. The veil leaving Simone's head, the gown tearing, the cuffs tightening past what was necessary. Simone, standing almost motionless while the report later described her as physically resisting. When multiple videos were placed side by side, the contradiction became impossible to explain away. The third stone came from the cruiser's location records. Travis and Colin had been outside their normal patrol area when the anonymous call was broadcast. Another unit had been closer. Yet Travis had announced himself as responding almost before dispatch finished giving the location. Mara stared at the record. "That is not an officer simply answering a call," she said. "That is an officer racing other units to it." The fourth stone was the official report itself. Subject became agitated. Subject physically resisted detention. Mara's investigators printed those sentences and pinned them beside still images from the guest videos. In every image, Simone stood with her chin level and her body still. A false official report was not simply an employee performance issue. It could be criminal. Then the team turned to the anonymous call. The audio specialist removed the cheap voice distortion. Beneath it was a middle-aged male voice with a local accent. Calm. Rehearsed. The wording mattered. The caller had used a police code for a theft in progress. Most civilians do not speak that way when calling emergency services. They say someone is stealing something. They may misuse the word robbery. They rarely reach naturally for radio language used by officers. That detail moved the search inward. The call had come from a prepaid phone, purchased with cash. But the phone still connected to a cellular tower. Investigators narrowed the location to a corridor along Route 9. Inside that area was a gas station not far from the precinct. The main fuel pump cameras showed very little. A gray pickup had backed into a corner positioned outside the obvious camera angles. Whoever parked it appeared to understand where the normal cameras were pointed. The driver did not know about the camera near the car wash. The owner had installed it after repeated thefts of wash tokens. That camera captured the truck. It captured the license plate. And it captured a man inside the driver's seat, holding a phone to his ear. At the same period the anonymous call was made. The truck belonged to Sergeant Bryce Halbrook, 19 years in Carroll County law enforcement, supervisor of records and complaint review. The same Bryce Halbrook, whose signature appeared at the bottom of each of Travis Maddox's 9 old complaints. Mara stood in front of the evidence wall for a long time. One hand rested near her belt, while she rearranged the pieces in her mind. Bryce had read the leadership memo. A new internal affairs commander was coming from outside. Old complaints would be reopened. Reopened complaints meant reopened reviews. Reopened reviews meant people would ask why the same supervisor had repeatedly signed the word unfounded beneath accusations involving the same officer. Bryce had 9 reasons to fear that question, so he researched the new commander. He found the wedding announcement, Bellamy Ridge Vineyard, a public ceremony, a bride whose face most officers had not yet seen. Then he found an unrelated news story about a stolen designer gown. He bought a prepaid phone, named an anonymous call. He described a black woman in a stolen gown and used police terminology. Most important, he did not directly order Travis Maddox to do anything. He did not need to. Bryce knew Travis's habits. I knew the officer's complaints. I knew the assumptions Travis carried into certain encounters. I knew a luxury venue, a black suspect, a felony allegation, and a chance to make a visible arrest would pull Travis toward the scene, like bait on a hook. The plan depended on Travis behaving exactly the way he had behaved for years. If it worked, the incoming internal affairs commander would be arrested, humiliated, possibly discredited before she even began reviewing files. A scandal could replace an audit. Bryce had aimed one officer at one bride without ever telling the officer he was being used. Mara looked at the board. The weapon did not know it had been fired, she said. Then her team reopened the 9 complaints against Travis. Investigators located the people who had filed them. A barber who had been stopped repeatedly during one summer. A school teacher ordered to sit on a curb in front of her students. A 19-year-old removed from his own driveway. Every complainant was black or brown. Every case had been closed quickly. Every review ended beneath Bryce Halbrook's signature. Some of the complainants had moved away. One man spoke into a recorder with exhausted calm. "I told the truth years ago. Nobody called me back until now." Mara listened to the statement twice. Then she wrote one sentence across the evidence paper in large letters. "I was never stopped. He was filed." Travis eventually sat in the state police conference room with a union representative on one side and an attorney on the other. His defense was short. I had responded to a dispatched call. He acted in good faith. The subject did not immediately produce identification. He followed his training. Mara did not argue. Argument was not her preferred instrument. She played the evidence. First, Gavin offering the receipt. Travis never looking at the phone. "Good faith calls the boutique," Mara said. She placed the shop information on the table. The telephone number was available. The dress information was available. The suspect photograph was available. She let that sit. Then she played the cruiser audio from the drive toward the vineyard. Some people belong at a place like Bellamy Ridge. Some people are shopping for a story. The union representative shifted in his seat. Mara played the moment Travis disabled his camera. Then she placed the report beside the synchronized video timeline. Subject physically resisted detention. On the screen, Simone stood still. Mara looked at Travis. "Show me which part was the training." His attorney asked for a break. It changed nothing. Breaks do not change recordings. Colin Hayes went through a different kind of ordeal. No one openly threatened him. That was what made the pressure difficult to describe. Hallway conversations stopped when he approached. Officers who once joked with him suddenly became busy. One evening, he found the side mirror of his cruiser folded flat against the window. Not damaged, just folded. A message designed to remain deniable. A former academy instructor called him with a friendly voice and reminded him how small a county can become for an officer with a reputation. Colin ended the call. Then he sat at his kitchen table with a notebook he had been filling since the wedding. Times, statements, observations, everything he had written while his memory was fresh, because writing had given his shaking hands something to do. He read the notebook from front to back. Then he carried it into Mara Sterling's conference room. He placed it on the table. "I should have done more than suggest we check the receipt," he said. Mara waited. She got handcuffed at her own wedding, while I stood there holding her grandmother's veil in an evidence bag. Colin's jaw tightened. "Whatever. Telling the truth costs me. Write it down. All of it." Mara studied him. "Sit down, Officer Hayes." For the first time since the wedding, her voice carried something almost warm. "The cost is my department now." Colin's testimony closed the remaining gaps. He confirmed the cuffs were tightened deliberately. He confirmed Travis disabled his camera intentionally. He confirmed the report language was written, while Travis commented openly about making the story hold up later. Simone encountered Travis only once, while the investigation was active. It happened in a hallway near records. I was being escorted in one direction. She was walking in the other. The escort suddenly found a bulletin board unusually interesting. Travis stopped. Without the confidence of a duty belt and unquestioned authority, he looked smaller. "Chief," he said. His voice broke on the word. "If I had known who you were." Simone stopped. "I know." Travis blinked. "That's the confession," she said. He stared at her. "If you had known my rank, I would have received respect. My rank should not have mattered." Simone's voice remained calm. "My receipt should have." She took one step, then paused without turning fully toward him. "You didn't see a bride that day. You saw a story you had already written before you reached the aisle." She looked back once. "That's the problem I was hired to fix. And you made the case for me more clearly than I ever could." Simone walked away. Travis remained in the hallway until the escort called his name twice. Mara Sterling's investigation grew into hundreds of pages. The state prosecutor reviewed the evidence and approved charges. A disciplinary board scheduled formal proceedings. State police also moved against Bryce Halbrook, the record supervisor who had spent years making complaints disappear. Investigators entered the precinct quietly and found him reaching for his coffee. The disciplinary process moved faster than the criminal cases. Real justice usually moves slowly. It requires documents, hearings, challenges, witnesses, attorneys, and procedures that do not care how loudly the public is demanding an ending. The board issued its findings in a municipal auditorium because police headquarters could not hold the number of observers and cameras. Officer Travis Maddox, a 12-year veteran, was terminated. His state law enforcement certification was revoked, preventing him from serving as a police officer in Virginia again. Criminal charges followed, including falsifying an official report and unlawful detention. Facing synchronized video, body camera evidence, dispatch records, and his own partner's notebook, Travis accepted a plea agreement. A conviction entered his record. He received supervised probation and 400 hours of community service. He left the courthouse through a side exit. A janitor pushing a cart nearby did not look up. For once, a scene did not notice Travis Maddox at all. Bryce Halbrook chose trial. The decision did not help him. Jurors heard the cleaned audio of the anonymous call. They saw the car wash camera footage. They saw his truck and his phone. They read his signature 9 times beneath old complaint findings. The prosecutor's closing argument was brief. "I did not break the law despite knowing how the system worked," she said. "I broke the law because he knew exactly how it worked." The jury found him guilty of making a false report and obstructing justice. He received a prison sentence, part of which was suspended under the court's terms. State law also cost him his pension. 19 years of retirement security disappeared because he tried to protect paperwork designed to hide what had happened before. The paperwork became evidence against him. There was one bitter footnote. Police later found the actual person who had stolen the bridal sample gown. She was a white woman in her 20s, the same person shown in the boutique photograph. She was arrested while attempting to return the dress for store credit in another county. The officer handling that arrest called the boutique first. The verification took only a short time. No assumptions were required. No wedding was destroyed. Then came the work Simone had actually been hired to do. New department directives went out under Chief Nolan Reeves's signature, but everyone inside the building recognized Simone's influence in the language. Anonymous calls could no longer become custodial action based only on instinct. Officers had to seek callback verification, independent corroboration, or some other reliable confirmation before turning an unverified accusation into handcuffs when circumstances allowed verification. No shortcut was allowed simply because an allegation sounded serious. The department replaced body cameras with models officers could not manually shut down during active encounters. Recordings uploaded automatically into secure storage outside the control of the officer wearing the camera. Complaint procedures changed too. A long-term audit reopened old cases that had been closed under questionable review practices. More officers faced discipline after independent examination. Several people who had filed complaints years earlier received letters from the department. Each letter began with words government agencies rarely write willingly. "We were wrong, and this is what we are doing about it." The barber, who had been stopped repeatedly, framed his letter. After the criminal and disciplinary cases were resolved, Simone gave her first formal address to the assembled department. Patrol officers stood beside records employees. Dispatches filled one side of the briefing room. Command staff lined the walls. Nobody knew what kind of speech to expect from the woman people had quietly started calling the bride. Simone brought no notes. She looked across the room. "Dispatcher Parker, please stand." Renee froze with a coffee cup still in one hand. She stood slowly. Simone faced the department. At Bellamy Ridge, this dispatcher ran my name and understood immediately what that information was going to do to the radio channel. The room remained silent. She had only a few seconds to decide between what was comfortable and what was true. "Simone, let the point settle. Most careers are never tested that clearly. I've investigated police conduct for 15 years, and I can tell you something about courage in this profession." She looked toward Renee. Courage does not always look like kicking down a door or running toward danger. Sometimes it looks like a voice saying an inconvenient truth into a microphone. Simone crossed the room and shook Renee's hand. A photograph captured both women with wet eyes and restrained smiles. The image later hung on the dispatch center wall. The briefing room stood to applaud. Some people rose more quickly than others. Simone noticed that and preferred it. Respect that has to grow is sturdier than respect performed because everyone else is standing. As the room emptied, Colin Hayes lingered near the door. He stood last in line, still uncertain what place the department had for him after testifying against his partner. Simone stopped in front of him. "You kept your camera on." Colin looked down. "That was policy, Chief." "No," Simone said. "Policy is what Travis quoted when it was useful to him. What you did was the job." Colin looked up. Simone continued. "You also told the truth, after realizing you should have spoken sooner. Don't waste the lesson by pretending the first hesitation never happened." "No, Chief. Learn from it." "I will." She nodded once and let him leave. A letter later arrived from Bellamy Ridge Vineyard. The owners told Simone that the Rose Arch had been rebuilt. They told her the interrupted wedding had stayed with them, and they made one offer. The lawn was hers whenever she and Gavin were ready. No fee, no conditions, for as long as the vineyard existed, because one thing remained unfinished: the vows. When Simone and Gavin finally returned, the white chairs were arranged on the same lawn. The Rose Arch stood again, fuller and stronger. Many of the same guests returned. A few unexpected faces stood near the gate. Officers in dress uniforms had formed two quiet lines. Nobody ordered them there. They had asked permission to come. Colin Hayes stood among them wearing white gloves and trying very hard to keep his expression under control. He managed until the music started. Renee Parker sat nearby with a tissue already in her hand. The cellist returned too. This time his chair faced the right direction. He played with the concentration of a man paying back a debt he had carried longer than anyone requested. Reverend Elias Carter took his place beneath the repaired arch. He opened the same worn Bible to the page that had waited all those months. He looked at Gavin, then at the guests. As I was saying, the entire lawn laughed and cried at once. Simone walked down the aisle on her own feet, one careful choice at a time. Her grandmother's veil had been repaired by hand. The seamstress offered to hide the damage completely. Simone refused. A thin line of new thread remained where the lace had torn. "Some history should show," she said. Gavin's voice cracked again during his vows. Some things were not supposed to be improved. Then Simone spoke. She returned to the exact sentence that had been interrupted beneath the arch the first time. She finished every word she had been owed. When they kissed, the cheer rolled across the vineyard and startled birds from the vines. Back at Internal Affairs, a small glass display case appeared beside the entrance, where every officer could see it. Inside rested a pair of handcuffs and a narrow strip of torn white satin. There was no plaque celebrating victory, no photograph of Travis Maddox, no headline about Simone. Only one handwritten card: "Run every name like it's your own." That line became the simplest version of everything the department had learned. And this is where the story becomes larger than one officer, one wedding, or one shocking radio return. Because the deepest problem was never that Travis Maddox arrested the wrong important woman. Simone's rank did not make the arrest wrong. Her badge did not create her dignity. Her years of service did not suddenly transform her into someone who deserved to have her receipt checked. She deserved that before dispatch ever ran her name. She deserved it when Travis saw only a black bride in an expensive gown and decided the story before asking a question. That is why her answer in the hallway mattered so much. "If I had known who you were," Travis told her. And Simone understood immediately what the sentence revealed. If he had known her title, he would have treated her differently. That was not a defense. It was the confession. Respect that depends on discovering power is not respect. It is fear wearing good manners. The receipt should have mattered. The offer to retrieve identification should have mattered. The sister asking him to call the boutique should have mattered. The rookie suggesting verification should have mattered. The reverend telling him he knew the bride should have mattered. The photograph of the actual suspect should have mattered. Truth offered him door after door. He chose not to open any of them because he had already written the ending in his head. That is one of the lessons this story leaves behind for anyone, not only people who wear badges. We all tell ourselves stories about strangers. Sometimes the stories are harmless guesses. Sometimes they shape decisions before the other person has been allowed to speak. We look at clothing, neighborhoods, accents, age, race, jobs, cars, titles, and money, then fill the empty spaces with assumptions. The danger begins when we stop treating those assumptions like guesses and start treating them like evidence. Simone's wedding was destroyed because Travis trusted the story in his own mind more than the facts directly in front of him. There is another lesson in Colin Hayes. I knew early that something felt wrong. His stomach told him before his career did. He suggested calling the boutique. He questioned the receipt being ignored. But he also became quiet when a senior officer pushed back. Later, Colin could have protected himself by saying he was only the rookie. He could have turned off his own camera. He could have adjusted his memory to match Travis's report. I did not. I kept the camera running. He wrote down what he remembered. Then, he walked into an independent investigation, knowing the truth might make his own workplace colder. That does not erase the moment he wished he had spoken more strongly at the vineyard. And Simone never asked him to erase it. She asked him to learn from it. That is an important kind of grace. Grace is not pretending a person handled everything perfectly. Grace can mean allowing someone to take responsibility for hesitation and still become braver the next time. Colin's courage arrived late compared with what he wished. It still mattered. Renee Parker's courage looked different. She never stepped onto the vineyard lawn. She never faced Travis directly. She sat in a dispatch center with a microphone and a computer screen. For a few seconds, she had information that would change the entire encounter. She could have softened it, delayed it, called a supervisor first to protect herself from being blamed for embarrassing an officer over an open channel. Instead, she read the truth into the radio. That decision did not require physical strength. It required clarity. Sometimes courage is simply refusing to edit the truth, because the truth will make powerful people uncomfortable. Mara Sterling showed another form of courage. She did not arrive with anger. She did not build the investigation around public outrage. She built it around evidence. Body camera, guest recordings, location records, the report, the call audio, the cellular tower, the car wash camera, the old complaints, one verified stone at a time. That matters because justice built only on anger can become fragile. Documentation is slower. Procedure can feel unsatisfying when everyone already thinks they know what happened. But careful process is what separates accountability from revenge. Simone understood that immediately when she removed herself from her own case. She could have taken control. She was the new head of internal affairs. She had been humiliated publicly. Millions of people were angry on her behalf. Instead, she said the most professional thing possible. I'm the victim. Victims don't run their own investigations. That choice may be one of the strongest moments in the entire story. Power is easiest to admire when someone uses it against an enemy. Real integrity often appears when a person chooses limits on her own power even when nobody would have blamed her for using it. Simone did not need to personally punish Travis. She needed the truth to survive his lawyer. So she stepped aside, and because she did, every consequence that followed rested on evidence instead of personal retaliation. There is also the quieter lesson of Bryce Halbrook. I understood the system well enough to manipulate it. He knew complaint procedures. I knew how officers were assigned. I knew how anonymous calls were handled. I knew Travis's habits better than Travis understood himself. For years, that knowledge protected him. In the end, it became the reason the evidence fit together. Systems remember more than people think. A signature repeated across old files becomes a pattern. A call touches a cellular tower. A truck crosses a camera nobody noticed. A rookie leaves his body camera running. A dispatcher types 4 careful words into a call note. A wedding guest keeps recording when everyone wishes the moment would disappear. Truth can look scattered while events are happening. Later, patient people can put the pieces beside one another. That is why small acts of honesty matter, even when they seem too small to change anything. The dispatcher did not know her call note would help expose a conspiracy. Colin did not know his body camera would become one of the strongest pieces of evidence. The owner of the car wash did not install a camera to investigate police corruption. The wedding guests were trying to preserve memories, not build a criminal case. Yet each piece mattered because it was real. There is a lesson in Gavin too. He loved Simone enough to be furious. He also understood that anger could make the situation worse. His friends held him back, because everyone knew one impulsive choice might lead to another arrest. Restraint can feel like weakness when someone you love is being mistreated. It is not always weakness. Sometimes restraint is how you protect the person you are trying to defend. Gavin used his phone. He found the receipt. He contacted legal help. He stayed near Simone without turning the lawn into a physical confrontation. I had every reason to want revenge later. What he wanted most was to finish the vows. That tells us something about healing. Healing does not always mean erasing the place where something terrible happened. Sometimes people return to it and make a different memory there. Bellamy Ridge did not disappear from Simone's life. She walked down the same lawn again. She stood beneath another rose arch. She wore the repaired veil, and she asked the seamstress not to hide every trace of damage. Some history should show. That sentence carries more wisdom than it first appears to. We often think healing means becoming exactly the person we were before something painful happened. Sometimes that is impossible. Sometimes it is not even the goal. A repaired thing can remain beautiful without pretending it was never torn. The thin line of new thread in the veil did not ruin it. It told the truth about what the family had survived. The same can be true of people. A scar does not cancel dignity. A mistake does not have to become an identity. A painful memory does not have to control every future one. The question is what we choose to build around it. Simone built better policy. Colin built a stronger conscience. Renee built trust in a profession that often overlooks dispatchers. The department built new safeguards. The vineyard rebuilt the arch. And Simone and Gavin finished their vows. Forgiveness also appears in the story in a quiet way. Simone did not tell Travis that what he did was acceptable. She did not protect him from consequences. She did not use warm language to reduce the seriousness of what happened. But she also did not turn her new authority into a personal campaign to humiliate him. She let evidence speak. That is not the same thing as forgetting. Sometimes forgiveness begins by refusing to become consumed by the person who hurt you. Accountability can continue while your own life moves forward. Travis faced the law. Bryce faced the law. Simone went back to the altar. Those outcomes can exist together. And perhaps the most important message is written on that small card beside the handcuffs and torn satin. Run every name like it's your own. The sentence is about more than police databases. It means slow down long enough to remember that the person in front of you has a full life you cannot see. A family, a history, people who love them, a name that matters to somebody. If the person were your sister, your son, your mother, your closest friend, would you check the receipt before deciding it was fake? Would you call the store? Would you listen when they offered identification? Would you tighten the cuffs because you were irritated? Would you change the report because the truth made you look careless? Most of us will never make those exact choices, but we make smaller versions every day. Do we listen before judging? Do we verify before repeating a rumor? Do we speak when someone with more authority is clearly wrong? Do we protect our own comfort, or do we protect the truth? Do we apologize when our assumptions hurt someone? Do we change the system that allowed the mistake, or do we simply promise to do better next time? The story does not ask everyone to be fearless. Nobody in it was fearless. Colin was afraid of his partner, and later afraid of his co-workers. Renee understood exactly how explosive her radio message would be. Gavin was terrified that one wrong movement would make the wedding even worse. Simone herself had every reason to feel anger beneath her calm. Courage was not the absence of those feelings. Courage was the choice made while carrying them. That is a more useful kind of courage, because ordinary people can practice it. Maybe your moment is not a police radio. Maybe it is a meeting where someone is blamed unfairly. Maybe it is a family conversation where everybody is repeating something nobody has verified. Maybe it is a workplace where a new employee is treated differently because people have already decided what kind of person she must be. Maybe it is simply a few seconds when everyone else stays quiet, and you know one true sentence needs to be said. You may not know whether speaking will change the whole room. Renee did not know. Colin did not know. The wedding guests did not know their videos would become evidence. But somebody is usually listening. And sometimes a system changes because one person leaves the camera on. One dispatcher reads the full return. One witness saves the video. One investigator refuses to rush. One victim chooses procedure over revenge. One department finally writes, "We were wrong." That last sentence matters too. Institutions often fear admitting mistakes because they believe an apology makes them weaker. In reality, refusing to correct a known wrong is usually what makes trust collapse. Those letters to the old complainants could not give years back. They could not erase humiliation. But saying we were wrong, followed by showing what would change, was still better than another file stamped closed. Responsibility is not magic. It does not reverse time. It makes the next choice more honest. That is what the rebuilt wedding represented. The first ceremony was interrupted before Simone could finish her vows. The second ceremony did not pretend the interruption never happened. The repaired veil carried a visible seam. Colin stood at the gate. Renee sat among the guests. The cellist turned his chair toward the couple. The same people who had watched a terrible moment were allowed to witness a better one. The story did not end with a guilty verdict. It ended with unfinished words being completed. Maybe that is the warmest lesson of all. Justice matters. Consequences matter. Policies matter. But human beings also need the chance to return to the life that was interrupted. Simone was not only an internal affairs commander. She was a bride whose wedding had been taken away from her. So after the investigations, cameras, hearings, and reforms, she went back to the vineyard and became simply Simone again. She took Gavin's hands. She finished every sentence. And when the vows were complete, nobody needed a radio to tell them who she was. She was a woman who had been treated unfairly, refused to surrender her dignity, demanded accountability without turning it into revenge, and then chose to keep living beyond the worst day of the story. That is strength worth remembering. So if you imagine yourself standing somewhere among those vineyard rows, do not ask only what you hope you would do. Ask what you actually do in smaller moments now. When authority enters the room, do you stop trusting your own eyes? When the crowd laughs, do you laugh too? When someone offers evidence that challenges your assumption, do you look at it? When you realize you were wrong, do you defend your pride or correct the mistake? When telling the truth may cost you something, do you stay quiet or keep the camera running? There may never be a dramatic silence on a county-wide police radio. Most choices are quieter than that. A microphone, a receipt, a notebook, a phone camera, a sentence spoken at the right moment, and a few seconds to decide what kind of person we are going to be. Dignity does not require a title. Truth does not become more true because the person speaking it outranks us. And respect given only after power is revealed was never real respect to begin with. Run every name like it's your own. Listen before you decide. Verify before you accuse. Speak when silence would help the wrong thing continue. Accept consequences when your choices cause harm. Leave room for people to learn, but do not confuse learning with avoiding responsibility. And when something in your life has been torn, remember Simone's veil. Repair it if you can. You do not always have to hide the seam. Sometimes the visible thread is proof that the story continued.